Evening, David.
Hello. Hey, Jordan. You hear me okay?
I can. It. Maybe my headphones. Little.
Okay.
Oh no. Okay. No.
That
Yeah.
better?
You sound great. Yeah. You
Oh,
sound
good.
great.
Okay. I just upgraded you'll probably hear me say, if you stick, you'll probably hear me say, I just upgraded my Mac last night to the new OS. Uh, Tahoe is the new OS. And I'm, I'm usually not an early adopter, but I updated my iPad, my iPhone, I am Apple Watch, and my Mac all to the very, very latest. Oh gosh, we're running dangerous now. So
Gotcha.
I don't know what's gonna happen. Weird sounds and weird things are happening all over my ecosystem here. So it's just
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. It's, while you're here, let's see. Um, I'm gonna share my screen to see if that works.
Yep. Looks good.
Uh, is it big enough? Is it big enough to read?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, thanks, thanks.
Mhm.
Good, because you never know for sure. I never know for sure.
Hey,
It's big enough.
welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for joining. We'll get started in, but it's just 7 p.m. Eastern now, so we'll get started in a minute. Let some other folks arrive. I don't know, Jordan, do you have an idea how many we're expecting tonight?
Yeah, we had 14 registered.
Oh, Good evening. Hi, Anna. Just joined. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. I'm looking outside to see if it's going to rain. I'm told it's supposed to rain. At least if you can trust Alexa. Alexa says it's. Oh, I better stop talking. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
she's gonna.
she'll talk back.
She'll hear me. But um, it's supposed to rain at 7, and our power. Just a word of warning: our power goes out uh, when it sprinkles sometimes. I don't know why, but I don't think we'll lose power. But just if we do, I'll get back as soon as I can. Luckily, I'm on battery power here too, so. But our internet router isn't. But we'll make do. If you lose me somehow, um, we'll join back. I know Jordan, you live in Knoxville too, right? So there was supposed to be severe weather coming our way tonight. So,
Yeah.
but we'll see. We should be fine. I think we're probably good to get going. Um, is it Anna and Therese? Therese?
Yes.
Oh, hello. Good morning.
Yes, I'm Teresa. Yeah.
Hi, Therese. Well, welcome. Have either of you guys been to one of our study sessions in the past?
No, this is my first one.
First one? Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Anna?
Yeah. I actually, but like I mentioned, I managed to double book myself. I usually follow the Central study group. I
Hmm.
joined them a couple of weeks ago. But I
Okay.
noticed this one, and so I was trying to. I just forgot and double dipped myself. So I will actually have
Oh.
to drop off a little bit to join the other study
Oh,
group.
okay. No
But my
worries.
first time on this one, so I
was-
appreciate the
Yeah.
quick visit.
We used to do, we're glad to have you. Never how long you can stay. We are recording, so aren't we recording, Jordan?
Yep, we're
Oh.
we're recording. After the call, you'll get or after the session, you'll get a email from us with a link to the recording and a link to uh, future events as well.
Great,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Yeah, and so just sometimes, sometimes 2 people show up, sometimes 10, sometimes 20, very rarely 20. But these are we do this as a service, East Tennessee chapter, just to, have people have the opportunity if particularly if they're studying for certifications. It's one of the things I like to do in these sessions is talk about things you might see on an exam or things you should focus on in an exam. So, we do these almost every month. Sometimes we miss one every now and then, but just to say, next month we're going to do one about product ownership analysis. That's one of the certifications you can get with IABA now. It's been out for 2 or 3 years now, but with us, you can be a certified product owner. And if you're into certified product owner analysis, if you're interested in that, but you may already have done that, but anyway, by way of an introduction, Jordan here online is our IABA East Tennessee president. Jordan, anything you'd like to say?
No, just thanks everyone for joining us. Like I said, you'll get some follow-up information from us if you're interested in learning more about us or joining future study sessions, you're in for a real treat. David is been doing this for a long time. He's certified in basically everything you can get certified in. Yeah, so again, thanks for joining us.
Kind words. Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, I've done a few certifications, particularly IIBA certifications. So, but tonight we're going to focus on requirements lifecycle management. Last month we were doing elicitation and collaboration. And before that, we was stepping right through the BABOK. But like I said, next month we're going to take a little bit of a detour and talk about product ownership analysis. So we've got a presentation on that. So glad to do it. I'm David Thompson. I've been active with IIVA East Tennessee chapter for a few years, and I'm a CBAP and have some other certifications you'll see on screen. But my focus here is to help people learn about business analysis, but as well as prep for any kind of certification they might be interested in, whether it's core business analysis certifications like the ECBA, CCBA, or CBAP. So you'll see these sessions are like that, talking about things you might want to follow up on, things you might particularly want to study on. So with that, we'll dig in. Let's see. I just upgraded my Mac to the newest OS last night, and so some weird stuff happens, and I'm just learning how to use my machine again. So bear with me if you see anything happening weird that's unexpected. As a basis for our discussion tonight, obviously the BABOK is our primary focus. We're utilizing all information, and we're not deviating. We're giving some real world examples in some parts about how to apply the BABOK, but the BABOK is our standard, especially if you're studying for a certification exam. There is the real world that we all live and work in, and then there is the BABOK world. And so in order to pass the certification exam, you need to have your BABOK world hat on. Thinking of that. So I also have taken some references from the Watermark Learning. It's a certified authorized IIBA training partner, Watermark Learning. They have a really great guide that helped me when I was studying for my CBAP. I borrowed some examples from that. Very helpful if you are studying for CCBA or CBAP. I would recommend getting that book. So that's where you'll see some of the good information. So requirements lifecycle management. Quick overview if you are interested in taking any of the ECBA, CCBA, or CBAP exams. This gives you a breakdown of how much of RLCM, as they call it, is covered in each of those exams. So about 20% of ECBA is requirements lifecycle management, 18% for CCBA, and 15% for CBAP. So that's good to know. You think, oh, which section should I study for most? We do a thing, and you can find this online too, but we've got a presentation we do with East Tennessee where we break down the different percentages of exam questions by topic typically, and this is something that IIBA publishes. We just combine it. We have a presentation on it if you're interested in that. So let's see, I'm still getting used to how to flip to the next page. Okay, so requirements lifecycle management. I say this about every knowledge area of the BABOK, but it's one of my favorites. So I love requirements lifecycle management because I just do. It's chapter 5 in the BABOK, which will mean something when you see a slide here in a minute or two. But it is chapter 5 in the BABOK. Sometimes people will refer to it as RLCM. I do sometimes because requirements lifecycle management is a mouthful. But its real purpose is it describes the tasks to manage and maintain requirements and design information. So we'll talk a lot about requirements traceability, relationships between requirements, how to assess changes that might come up in requirements, and how to gain consensus and governance, how to leverage governance processes you might have in place in an initiative in your enterprise. One of the things that BABOK says is it ensures business stakeholder and solution requirements in design are aligned and implemented. And I love that word align. I'm on a project right now where everybody uses the word aligned. Yes, we are aligned. Yes, I need to align. I align. Alignment is a great thing. And obviously implementing a design is very important, but you can't do that unless you have very good, solid requirements, business and stakeholder requirements, and the solution requirements that you need to implement the design so that you have a successful implementation. So those are things to keep in mind. Now this is something that I kind of illustrated because I like this. If you think about requirements lifecycle management, it begins with the representation of a business need. I think about that as like a tomato seed. You have this core thing that you need. It's a business need, and sometimes we as business analysts can help our business partners really think about what that core need is. You know, using things like the 5 whys, for example, to help us get to the core of what the business needs, why we need something, what the real core requirement is. You know, we need to make a lot of money this next quarter. Okay, well, you know, what's the real need behind that? How can we come up with a solution to help with that? You need to have good requirements for that. And so it continues through the development of that solution. The requirements are always there, and they're always being refined, and they're always being managed. That's because it's a life cycle. You can see from its first start popping out of the ground, this is a tomato example, to when it's actually on the vine, and maybe if you think about it, the representation of the tomatoes on the vine there indicates you're about to go live with this or something, or maybe you are live with it at that point. You've implemented a solution, whether it's a product or a service or some sort of implementing a process, and then you're utilizing, you're seeing it bear fruit, and then it ends when the solution is retired. And I thought about that. That's why I have the tomatoes sliced up on a plate. Once those tomatoes are consumed, you're done with it. Seriously, this season is over with. You've planted the seeds in the spring, the summer they grew, and by the end of summer, when it's starting to get to fall, you have some seeds harvested, and that kind of represents the whole solution life cycle, but the requirements life cycle. Sometimes you'll see that managing the requirements life cycle involves actually the reuse of requirements and identifying requirements that can be reused maybe for other or related initiatives. So I like to think of requirements lifecycle in this way. So yeah, let's see. So if you're familiar with the BABOK, you know that every knowledge area revolves around the business analysis core concept model, where you have if you read in the knowledge area, it tells you how each knowledge area will align with the different business analysis core concept model areas, which are, I'll say them in order this time: value, solution, need, stakeholder, change, and context. And we'll go through how these are applied to requirements lifecycle management. But the reason I have them organized in this manner, VSNSCC, is there's a mnemonic. If you're familiar with mnemonics, that's a way of repetitive remembering a series of words, and the watermark has a mnemonic for remembering these called vision success. So VSNSCC. If you remember the business analysis core concept, that'll help you. If you're planning to take one of the exams, that should be helpful to you to help you remember that. But the core concept model applying to requirements lifecycle management, we can start by thinking about the change. So as it relates to the requirements lifecycle management, you're managing how proposed changes to requirements and designs are evaluated during an initiative. So you may have some changes, some requirements, and then as you're doing something like testing or actually implementing the first minimum viable product for the solution, for example, there could be changes that come up. Oh, that doesn't work like we thought it was. We're going to have to reload. That requirement needs to be changed. And that's where things like your governance mindset come in, however you've established on the initiative, how you're going to handle those changes. The solution obviously is tracing the requirements that are that are found to a solution and design that can be implemented to meet that need. The context is, analyzing the context to support the traceability and the prioritization. Maybe thinking about the context of the requirements, from the different stakeholder perspectives and the like. The value that the requirement will bring, particularly thinking about how you can reuse the requirement, with maybe another initiative, or let that leverage and help you elicitate even other requirements. The stakeholder, how you collaborate with the stakeholder on the requirements lifecycle, get an agreement on anything that they might need to either change or approve for those requirements. And then the need, that's really where it starts, is tracing and prioritizing and maintaining those requirements to make sure that those needs are met. That's why we do these projects and these solutions, is to implement value and find value so that the solution can meet the core business needs. It's good. You'll see my little cloud up here. The tip is there, if you're thinking about taking the certification exam, it's a good idea to understand how this BACM applies to all of the knowledge areas in the BABOK. And luckily, it's spelled out really nicely in the BABOK for us how to do that for each knowledge area. So definitely take a look at that. Another exam tip is know these inputs, outputs, and tasks for all the knowledge areas in the BABOK, if you're planning to take particularly the CBAP and CCBA exams. So every knowledge area in the BABOK has defined what its inputs are for that knowledge area, what the outputs are expected, and what the tasks you're going to do to get those outputs. So you see, I mentioned before that RLCM is chapter 5 in the BABOK. So all these are numbered. So you can see there's a few inputs that you get to the requirements lifecycle management, and they're the requirements themselves. You may have some designs in mind already, the proposed change that you want to implement, that could be part of that. And you should have some verified requirements from the elicitation and collaboration phase. Hopefully you've gone through and you've had some good sessions with your stakeholders and identified requirements. Hopefully you have a requirements traceability matrix, or however you're maintaining requirements. I'm old school. I like the requirements traceability matrix, but a lot of folks use requirements system or something like Jira or something similar to help with requirements. So those will be inputs into the things you will do with requirements lifecycle management. So those tasks are tracing the requirements and maintaining the requirements, prioritizing the requirements, assessing any changes that come along. As we mentioned, changes happen, and then approving any requirements. And that's a shared exercise, of course, approving the requirements. So those are the tasks that you'll be doing in this knowledge area. And as we all know, we've worked on projects. There's not like, hey, we're in the requirements lifecycle management phase. It's a continuous process. And sometimes you're like, yeah, you're doing it, you're not thinking about it. It's not necessarily a phase in your project, but it's like, yeah, we've got the requirements. Let's do these tasks, tracing and maintaining, prioritizing, and that kind of stuff that just goes along with kind of like the next logical step after you're doing elicitation collaboration. But interestingly, you'll see these are numbered as well, the outputs. So the expectation is if you do the trace requirements task in requirements lifecycle management, your output is going to be traced requirements and designs that are traced. You're tracing your requirement to a design. You'll have requirements that are maintained. You'll have designs that are maintained. You'll have prioritized requirements. All this is pretty logical when you think about it. It's like, if we're going to prioritize requirements, our output will be prioritized requirements. Your changes, assessed. Any changes made for either requirements or the design will be something will be your output of this task. And then approving the requirements is logically approved requirements and approved design. So this kind of goes along. It's pretty easy to remember. It is something, you know, you don't necessarily have to know these for like an ECBA exam, but definitely for CCBA or CBAP, it'd be good to know those. But it definitely, this is all BA work, for example. So we're going to break each one of these down. You know, that first task is tracing requirements. You know, you want to do that to make sure that all the requirements are aligned and traceable, as the BABOK says. Alignment is really just making sure that they're consistent, they're related to each other, that you know what they are, they're clear. Traceability is, you know, understanding where it came from, you know, where it needs to be applied in the future, and how it may relate to other requirements. Some requirements may seem like they don't relate to each other at all, which is okay. But there may be something, you know, for example, if you have someone that's implementing a solution, some of these requirements are related, and you think, well, gosh, if we're going to have a good user interface with a simple way to log in that is secure and everything like that, you know, those are all requirements. You know, we need those things. That goes into kind of a design design method that will be implemented. For example, you can think about that as you're going along, and so that certainly helps when you're tracing these requirements. You can notice, okay, these all go together, these are related. If we implement this requirement, it will actually automatically implement this other requirement we heard from another stakeholder. Things like that. You'll see that when you start tracing your requirements. It also helps you to see, the BABOK tells us about impact analysis, and that's a really great thing. You say, oh gosh, if we change this, this will impact these 3 other requirements, and that's not good, or whatever. It helps you to kind of identify, it helps you to group. That's why I love using like a spreadsheet for a requirements traceability, because you know, you can filter and you can sort. It's very helpful to do that. I'll show you an example of that. It also helps you identify any gaps. Sometimes it takes someone. I work on a project, been working on for about a year now, where one of our key stakeholders and project leaders really likes to see things spelled out. So they can look through and they'd like to see in a macro level all of the requirements laid out and be able to review them all. And that was super helpful. So that when we put them all into Jira, the Jira system, they were all of a sudden in a different place, and they wanted to, they were reviewing them, and they're like, hey, can you put them back in a spreadsheet format? So things like that, seeing them in a certain way helps you identify any gaps. Like, oh, we didn't talk about this. You know, we need to make sure we need a requirement for this. So that can be helpful, especially as you're tracing requirements. And you know, understanding the impact of any potential changes that, you know, if something hits, and you know that it'll impact 3 or 4 other requirements. And also one of the key things about this is your hazard requirements in a traceability matrix. You can actually see where they get implemented by a feature, a design feature, whether that's tracking it to a design document, for example, or to a particular story. If you work in an agile fashion, which story implements this requirement, or which group of stories implements this requirement. That helps to be able to track that and say, oh yes, these have all been implemented. You can show your stakeholders, not only did we hear your requirement, we validated it with other requirements, and we also traced it to make sure that it, number one, got implemented, and then it got tested and it got sign off. And so now it's in a production system, for example. So that requirements repository, can be very valid, very, very valuable asset for you. You have a traceability matrix. You hopefully have set that up and determined that that's what you want to. You've determined, as from a business analysis planning approach, you've determined how you're going to do the requirements, where you're going to store your information management for that. So let's see, I think I have my next one. This is it's very small probably to see. This is a very high level sample of a requirements traceability matrix. And you probably can't see it at all. If I could zoom in a little bit, let's see. Maybe that helps. Yeah. So there's a couple of key things. I think I have a slide that talks about each of these. It's important to have a unique identifier for each requirement. Obviously, a description. Sometimes your requirements can be a little more formal in their statement. Depends on how your team decides to approach it. You may be very formal about your description of the requirement. You may even want to have the outline, a description, or a short sentence about what your user story might be, depending on how you're implementing. But this can be something that's very flexible. Your priority, it's always good to prioritize your requirements. That's something we'll talk about. Identifying the source of your requirements, who are your stakeholder in that. You can see some things here about who they were and what their role was, the category of requirements, and there's a way to categorize requirements. The BABOK can be very formal about how to categorize requirements, but that can be something. There's no set rules on that. You can figure out what works best in your situation. The objective, I like to do this. Say what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the objective of this? And I have things like avoiding rework, effective transition. A lot of implementation of solutions involves the transition. Whether it's organizational change management or something, or data transformation, or something like that. Effective transition to a new solution. Those are things to keep in mind. So those are things you could put. This is a template. Use it as you like. But those are things you might want to track. Design reference. This could be linked to a story or a document directly. These are unique identifiers that, well, this first requirement is in our design is D5, which is that could be the design document number 5, or it could be like a row in a spreadsheet for the design spreadsheet, or whatever that refers to. It could be a link to a story. There could be a test case. Hopefully you will have a test case. I like to show where we've tested a solution from a requirement. Also, these are all, I think, in progress. No test cases yet, but in any comments you might have, about that. So these are utilizing a matrix allows you to be transparent and put these requirements in front of all your stakeholders and say, hey, are there any gaps here? Is there anything we're missing? Is there anything we didn't get right? Is there anything you think we need? Do you approve of this? Getting the stakeholder approval on it. So this helps to leverage that. So let me zoom back out there and we'll dig in. Let's see. I think I can make this a little bigger. Hopefully that helps. So here we are about tracing requirements. We saw that the sample of the requirements matrix, and there are different relationships. And I got to be honest, I have trouble remembering all these, and I don't always use them. But if you're studying the BABOK, this will for a CCBA or CBAP test, this will be good to know, I would say. So but you do when you think about requirements, you think about that. And I mentioned it earlier as that, well, this requirement can help us implement that other requirement, or this one already satisfies another requirement. So derive is a way of identifying a relationship between requirements that one derives from another one. Necessity, when it makes sense to implement one when another one is implementing. Well, we're already doing this. Let's do this while we're at it. We're already implementing for our new product website the ability to use credit cards. Well, let's also implement the ability for folks to have something shipped to them through the carrier of their choice. That might be already working on the patient. It's I like to use this term. You're already doing surgery on the patient. Oh, Anna, understood. You have to drop. Thanks for joining. I'm glad you could join us. Great
Thank
evening.
you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
But yeah, I like to say if you're doing surgery on the patient, while you have them on the table, fix what you need to fix, and if you're opening up a system, for example, if you're working in a technology project, if they're working on an interface or security or something, take care of everything you can while it's being worked on. You know, these are the ones that are dependent upon each other. So satisfying, like I said, one requirement could satisfy another one. Typically that's very simple things. Just sort of no-brainers that you'll see. And then validate is when a requirement is verified to have fulfilled the need. You know, so it's validated, you know, it's been tested, and that's where the test cases come. So that's a good way to help with the tracing of the requirements, is these relationships. Let's see. All right, I'm having trouble getting the next slide. Let's see. I'll just click it. Maintaining requirements. And so requirements maintenance is really important, particularly when you think about it. You've taken the all the effort to you know, elicit the requirements, probably gone through workshops or surveys or interviews, whatever. There are a million different techniques you can use to actually find the requirements, document them, validate and verify that they're relevant. Maintaining them is a critical part of it, or else, you know, things change, and we want to make sure that these requirements are valid and consistent throughout the life cycle of a solution, particularly. So that's why it says the BABOK tells us that the requirements should be consistently represented. So using something like a matrix with it that has consistent categorization, and we'll get into a little bit. I got a slide or two about the categorization of requirements, different things to look for, but they're reviewed consistently. You know, is this still a valid requirement? Things change. No, we've implemented this solution, and now that kind of, we don't have that requirement anymore, for example. Or we're no longer, you know, needing to abide by this law because it's no longer applicable in our state. For, I don't know, who knows, things like that. It's important that your requirements not be vague, so that that there's such inside knowledge or inside wording that no one knows what it means when they join the project or the organization, and in a location that is easily acceptable. And that's something that you hopefully will have planned when you did your business analysis, planning, and monitoring. You're like, okay, here's our information management you know, plan for this project, for this implementation. We're going to keep all of our documentation, SharePoint, for example, and it's going to be accessible to folks that are in a project team. And, you know, all of our requirements traceability matrix is going to be in a spreadsheet, and here's the link to it. Things like that, just making sure that the project team can look at it, so that it's not something that you as the business analysts are keeping close to your vest and not sharing with the project team. It's very important to keep it open, so that folks can collaborate on it as well. Here are some of those attributes we talked about. I'll dig into those. Yeah, like I said before, clearly named and defined, easily available to stakeholders. Make sure that the original intent is preserved. Now this is a mnemonic again from the Watermark folks. They're good with mnemonics, but if you're trying to remember these for an exam, that's one thing. Otherwise, it just take it for what it says here, that, you know, your attributes, you know, should you know, they should have attributes of identifying the complexity. They should have an absolute reference, which is like a unique identifier. You understand the risks, who the author was, who the source from that was, what the status of them, who owns the requirement, the urgency of the requirement, the priority of the requirement, and the stability of the requirement. So stability is something I don't typically track on a requirements traceability matrix, because, you know, if you think that there's you know, a lot of volatility in the solution or the business that you're working with, that where things can change very quickly, or some risks that have popped up that may make the requirements a little less stable, then that's something you could track. It's definitely up to you from from a project to project, or initiative to initiative. Attributes of these may change if the requirement does not. That's a very important thing. You know, that one requirement that might seem just like a off the cuff, yeah, that's a nice to have, could very well overnight, depending upon things, turn into a must-have requirement. So that's key to make sure you're maintaining that, knowing that the requirement may not change, but that definitely its urgency or its complexity may change as well. Some requirements are candidates for reuse. We talked about reusing requirements. So it's important to make sure that they're tracked properly and that the stakeholders can validate that they're correct. Your stakeholders are the ones that really you can rely on your stakeholders to make sure that your requirements are verified. Okay, here we are. I hope I'm not taking too much time. Yeah, working good on time. You can see you can see on my screen we just have a few more slides left, but prioritizing the requirements. This is a ongoing process, as it says. This is something you continually will do, prioritize requirements. You know, it gets down. In fact, you know, I'm working on a project where we're down towards the end of the development cycle, and we're really prioritizing the requirements and having to think about, oh, is this something that has to be implemented now, or is it something could maybe be a fast follow, as they call it, something that happens, you know, next versus now. And you know, oh, this is a really big one. It really has to go in there. You know, that prioritization. Hopefully, you do all the prioritization, but as the business changes and the priorities change, your requirements priority will change as well. So sometimes that's a bit of negotiation, but it's important to continually check that. Hey, this requirement you mentioned, is this still a real big priority? Oh, no, that's something we don't have to do that. That's just something somebody wanted. Whatever, you know, it's important to really keep in touch with your stakeholders and make sure that you as a business analyst are helping to make sure that these requirements are definitely prioritized. Yeah, there could be some dependencies that come up as well that they might say, well, hey, now that we're doing this, we have to do this other requirement. So this is where a point of conflict, especially have multiple competing priorities, competing stakeholders, there definitely could be a chance to have some prioritization arguments or disagreements on that. So as business analysts, we can help facilitate any of those and make sure that the team has a common understanding of the impact of each of these requirements, especially as challenges and prioritization questions come up. All right, any question on those? Here's a good slide. This is another mnemonic from Watermark Learning. Credit debit parts. This is a stretch. Credit debit parts, but you're trying to remember the basis of requirements prioritization. There are these different criterias, and if you see RDBP, RTS, credit debit parts, I actually use this. I don't know. I read about it, and it helped me remember these. Why, I don't know, but you think about from a requirements prioritization perspective, like what is the cost of this? That helps with the prioritization. Well, that's going to be $1 million. Okay, well, maybe that's not as high of a priority as we think. It's more of a nice to have. So that thinking about that, cost is a big one. The risk, gosh, if we implement this could really, really put us on the teetering edge. Maybe you're implementing a system thing that your system may or may not be able to handle it. The risk, or thinking about all this, we don't want to implement this at Christmas time, for example. We're an online e-commerce store, and we really rely upon the holiday season for our sales. Thinking about the risk, it help with prioritization as well. Those dependencies help. The benefit, what is the benefit is, what the value that we're going to get out of implementing this. The stakeholders may say this will bring us, save us time, save us money, give us value, give us more money, whatever those benefits are. It's important that we help them articulate those. And especially if it's a matter of a project change or implementing a project change. Hey, we have to have a change order for this project because we found something that is so beneficial that it is important for us to prioritize this requirement. Penalty, it could be, hey, if we don't do this new process of recycling our waste or something, whatever, we're going to get fined by the government. There's going to be a penalty. The regulatory demands that are forcing us to do this. Or time sensitivity. Hey, we've got to get this done in time for the holiday season. I didn't notice Amazon Prime is having another Prime Day in October, and I'm thinking they probably said, we really got to get a jump on the holiday shopping. Let's do a Prime Day in October. I don't know. That's time sensitive to them. What do we need to do to implement that? Well, let's get this system up and let's put all these products. Whatever they had to do, there was something time sensitive about them thinking about, like, we need to do another Prime Day on this date. We're going to do this more often than one time we do it. So that's a good example of that. And the stability, the likelihood the requirement may change over time or is not agreed upon. Is this something we all agree on? We're kind of iffy on this one. Is this stable? That helps with thinking about, is this, if there's we may or may not need this in the next 3 months. That kind of iffiness about that will help with prioritization. So I love this slide because it definitely helps to point out how you can think about it. So something to bring up when you're actually doing requirements prioritization with your teams. Like, let's talk through all these, and adding these to your maybe a matrix or separate matrix or something to go along with your requirements traceability matrix would be probably very helpful to help if you get down to the point of, hey, we have to prioritize these requirements a lot. Assessing the changes, and here's another mnemonic I'll talk about, but evaluating how this change, how is it going to impact us, and how is it going to impact the other requirements we have, and how is it going to impact the designs we may or may not have already started working on. These changes that we have that popped up as let's say, for example, you're doing a new software rollout and you send it out to user acceptance testing, and the users are looking at it and say, this is not going to work for us. This is going to cause us all these extra steps. It's going to cost us time and money. We can't accept this. And the team goes back and says, hey, we have to make a change here. This requirement's going to change. Our design's going to have to change. This talks about the assessment formality. Your predictive approach may require more formal assessment due to change being more disruptive. So if you said, hey, we've already designed, this is how we're going to do it. We've already planned out that we're going to implement this. This is just what you get because we're 90% of the way done with the project. UAT is just this last step. We can make some tinkering changes to it, just very soft, but whereas an adaptive approach, like, hey, tell us what you think of this minimal viable product we have, or this first release of it. Tell us what you think. Give us your feedback. It's a lot. If you're doing an adaptive project, more of an agile based project, you're more likely to say the change is probably easier for it. Hey, we got some feedback from this. Here's some enhancements that we need to implement. That certainly helps, based on that type of implementation you have. If you're implementing a very predictive approach for an enterprise resource planning ERP system, the ability to make changes late is very difficult, very costly. So, but if it's like a formal, an informal, well, nothing's really informal, but maybe a more adaptable and growing website, for example, that's can develop as time goes on. With an adaptive agile approach that makes it easier typically to plan those changes. So when you're thinking about the impact of a change, it talks about thinking about the cost, the benefit, the urgency, the schedule, and impact. And those are very similar to what we just talked about. But if you want to remember those, C busy is how Watermark suggests you remember those. But those are things you think about. What's the cost of this? What's the benefit? How urgent is this change? Those things will certainly help you with that. Okay, and improving the requirements. The key with improving the requirements, it's one thing to document and just make sure that your stakeholders have agreement on what they are. So there's improving the design that the requirements are based on. When you're doing a predictive approach, approvals typically happen at the end of the project phase where you're just, it's like, hey, we've implemented phase 1, please approve. Versus adaptive, it's, a sprint review. Hey, this is what we did this time. Give us your feedback and we'll take back. We're gonna keep building, but if there are any enhancements or bugs or changes, those usually come every 2 to 4 iteration. Every iteration, which sprints usually last 2 to 4 weeks, and depending on whatever approach you're taking, but either it's important to understand any of those changes are defined in the plan and business analysis governance step that you did, hopefully in the business analysis planning and monitoring step. Typically work with your project managers if you have a project manager on that to define the governance. But part of our role as a BA is to make sure that we're aligning with the governance for the entire initiative and making sure that we fully understand what we need to do when there are changes and requirements and how to make sure that they get approved. This, it's real simple. It helps to make it simpler when you have a business governance, a business analysis governance plan or a project governance plan to help resolve any disputes. It's like, hey, this stakeholders can't answer this. We need to bring it up to the steering committee or the executive in charge, the one who signs the checks for the folks. That helps to, if you define that in the front end, that helps to leverage any disputes. So we need to bring this up to the steering committee, for example, and they'll help us resolve any of these requirement changes and make sure that we're approved. So there's a ton of techniques you can use, business analysis techniques that you can use on requirements lifecycle management. These are just a few of them. These are the ones that the BABOK, says. There are 50 techniques listed in the BABOK, and there are a million techniques. If you've ever seen my presentation I do on the 50 techniques, it's funny because I tried to do it. I actually did it in one hour session one time, and then the next time I said I got to break this into 2, and then I barely got it into 2 1 hour sessions, the 50. And then I decided the next time I do it to break it into 3 sessions, just so we can have time to go through all the techniques. But these are some of the techniques that definitely help you with requirements lifecycle management. So having things like data flow diagrams, super helpful. I'll go through a couple of these. The financial analysis is a big one. Use cases are really, really can help because the idea is that you're helping your stakeholders understand what those requirements are. Walking through these, this helps to also elicit some requirements. Workshops are good. Sometimes going through and writing out user stories can help to understand the requirements. I'm going to go through a couple techniques. Oh gosh, I'm going to get a better graphic of this. This is a use case diagram. This is kind of old school. This is a UML diagram for a use case. This is for a project I worked on during COVID, a test project when I was working on my MBI, and was to to monitor. They have wearable devices to indicate when people got close to each other. This is something I did for this, and this was by the book, the UML diagram. this is very plain Jane. This is just a quick example. I honestly feel like it's good to follow the rules, but something like this is something that you can leverage to help your stakeholders understand. But if you're following all the rules for a particular use case diagram and your stakeholders don't know what they mean, find a better way of illustrating that. So sometimes we can be by the book, but also confuse and frustrate our stakeholders. So whatever it takes to be able to clearly illustrate a use case to your stakeholders, I would follow that. So these are some by the book data flow diagrams. This is a context diagram, and then a more deeper level data flow diagram. Similar kind of thing. You can use these to kind of illustrate some things. These are also helpful to help your the folks that are implementing solutions for you to be able to talk through like what the possibilities are. We need to have data here. This is the kind of thing. Again, these are by the book, and if this confuses your stakeholders, then it's good to find something that is easier for them to digest. I used to be kind of very militant about following the rules about everything, but more and more I've kind of mellowed and say, why am I going to go to the trouble of following each one of these, standards if my stakeholders and my business partners don't understand what it is we're trying to do. So here's a kind of a BPMN business process modeling notation example from the BABOK. Yeah, this is great. It shows you how to do that. Process modeling is a fantastic tool, particularly when requirements lifecycle management, to be able to illustrate, what a process looks like for your stakeholders, to make sure that you all understand it, and then others on the project or the initiative have a common understanding about what it is that's either how a process is currently working or how the process is intended to work in the future. So, like I said, once again, whatever works best to illustrate for your stakeholders, definitely use it. And your stakeholders, so make sure you're able to adapt to them. But yeah, process modeling, the BABOK tells us there's a lot of great resources. Lucid Chart, for example, is a company that has a great modeling tools. Visio, you can use Visio to do process modeling. But like I said, the key is to make sure that your stakeholders understand what it is you're trying to convey. Functional decomposition, it's taking a large topic and breaking it down into logical chunks. And this is an example. I like to say this is kind of an example of organized functional decomposition. I found this on the internet, but it's taking what a travel agency does and kind of breaks it down. It's color coded. It's very easy to see. They're numbered and sequenced. This is a good example. You could, what is it that we're doing here? What are our requirements here? Well, we need to be able to register our users. We need to be able to let them look at things. We need to have promotions. We need to allow them to search. We need to allow them to reserve tours and make payments and make all that stuff. You think about it logically, what is all that we want to do? Let's break it down. What do they need to do if they do that? This is the basis of requirements lifecycle. Say, well, now we need them to be able to do this. You add that on. This helps to break down and prioritize. It's like, okay, well, this first release, we're not gonna let them delete the reservation. Let's leave that off. That's for later. For example, this helps with prioritization of these. That deleting reservation is going to be, cost us $100,000 to implement, for example. Whatever that is, this is not a high priority for us. This helps, something like this really helps your stakeholders to visualize and say, okay, I think I understand this now. So this is something you can leverage in whatever form. Like I said, whatever helps you to convey that for a common understanding amongst your stakeholders to make sure that everybody's, there at the same point, singing from the same songbook, I guess, as you'd say. But yeah, that's all we have. about requirements lifecycle management. Any questions? I see Sherry's joined. Hi, Sherry. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, David. Thank you. Sorry I was
Yeah.
late.
Oh, no worries. That's fine. Yeah. I can't believe I didn't think we would use up all the time for this topic, but it's a good topic, and it's one of my favorites. I say that, I say that every time. So I'm so glad you all could join tonight, and please let me know if you have any questions. I think Sherry, you'll be sending something out. You or Jordan will be sending something out about the credit that you can get. I know Anna and Therese were on here, so yeah, I think that's all we have.
Okay. Thanks, David. Thanks everyone for
All right.
joining us tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have a follow-up email sent out with how to get your CDU credit for professional development and this recording as well.
All right, that sounds awesome. Yeah, so glad we could do this tonight. I look forward to, again, next month we're going to do the product owner analysis discussion. So that's a fun one. It's one of my favorites. Look for that invitation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a great evening.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.